I'm Dr. Lunsford and excited to be here with you in this course on mentoring and coaching fundamentals. In this unit, we're going to talk in depth about coaching fundamentals. I have 4 points that I want to make to you today in this video. The first is really defining what coaching is. People often get confused about the difference between coaching and mentoring. One way to think about it is that coaches don't have to have the same level of expertise as a mentor might in an organization. Coaching tends to be of shorter duration and is goal-focused and, importantly, is not therapy. Now, we might do coaching as part of our mentoring relationships. Mentoring expects that it's maybe a more in-depth relationship, lasts longer, you've got someone with some expertise in the areas you wish to develop. So I often think of it as we might go back and forth between mentoring and coaching is a subset in the mentoring universe. So I hope it helps you to think about coaching being very goal-directed and short-term. We also want to think of these relationships as co-learning relationships rather than you're teaching someone how to do something. That's really going to be about helping people develop a particular skill and not necessarily coaching or mentoring. So this idea of co-learning and setting some goals together is central to the idea of coaching. One of the frameworks, and you'll read about this in the readings, is the monitor, evaluate, modification. I'll say that again. Monitor, evaluate, modification. This is a helpful framework to think about. You're monitoring the activities that you're doing together when you're coaching. You work with your coachee to evaluate their progress, and then you're going to modify plans based on what's happened. So it's a circular framework that really helps us think about the learning. It is co-learning. The skill of coaching is asking questions so that you can engage in some dialogue. You're not being directive. You're not talking at the person. We often might think of athletic coaches, but if you really talk with coaches in sports, they are coaching because it's co-learning. They're working with a player about how to improve in a particular area, often skill or performance-based. We're focused on coaching at work. So again, just emphasizing this monitor, evaluate, modification is essential to that co-learning process. You're also going to learn in the readings that applications are important. So where might we apply coaching versus mentoring? And some of the authors you are going to read from really talk about it in 3 areas, and I think this is quite helpful. One is we might coach someone to develop skills, a particular skill. Maybe they need to be a better public speaker. They need to make a big presentation to some executives. They might need to learn a particular technique in a more research-based setting. So it's developing a very specific skill. Another might be performance. They already have some skills in this area and now want to really perform at a higher level. And coaching is applicable in that setting as well. How can you leverage strengths, leverage your networks and people to increase your performance? The third is developmental. And when we talk about developmental coaching, this is often more in the area of personal development. What are your life goals? How might you think about your work-life balance? So coaching is also often applicable at work, but it has this more developmental feel to it. We're not focused on a skill or performance per se, but how do you want your life to unfold or even your career to unfold at this particular organization or at work? A third area that's helpful to think about when we think about coaching and mentoring for that matter are outcomes. And you learned all about outcomes with mentoring, and there are 3 main categories of outcomes with coaching. The first is cognitive, so how you think about a situation or how you think about approaching something at work that you need to get done. So it's really going to change how you think about it and how you then engage with others. The second is skills-based, and it really refers here to behavior. So now I'm going to try this new skill, and I'm going to know if I'm doing that because those behaviors actually got better. I gave a better presentation. It was very well received, which is different from my thinking about what I might do. They might be interrelated, but it helps us to think about what's the focus and goal of that coaching. Can I achieve one of these two outcomes? The third outcome is affective, or how you feel about a situation. It might be the case that someone is already quite skilled, but they're very nervous, or they're experiencing stress or anxiety, and they just need some coaching to change their feelings about the situation. It often can be the case when you work with teams that maybe one team member doesn't like another team member, and the coaching is really how to change your approach and feelings for that person so that you can perform well as a group. So when we think about these outcomes, in other words, how do we know coaching worked? We would want to look at one of these three areas. And you might want to think about, how does this match up with some of the outcomes in the mentoring arena? And they're somewhat similar, although there seems to be some additional categories in mentoring with related to stress levels, kind of health outcomes, potentially as well. Finally, the big area we want to think about are ethics. We don't talk a lot about this in the United States. Europe and Canada, Australia, ethics are a much bigger deal in both coaching and mentoring relationships. We are starting to see some changes in this area, but one of the areas that I want you to look at in this unit are the global ethics for coaching. These are put out by the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, and they really focus ethics for mentoring, coaching, and supervision. They involve all three of those behaviors in the EMCC. I think this is a useful framework to help guide our thinking about our ethical responsibilities when we engage in these relationships. The ethics really fall into three main categories: working with clients, your professional conduct, and engaging in excellent practice. I'm not going to go over all the details. You can read these in the Global Code of Ethics. But just as a summary, when we talk about the first one, which is engaging with clients, what we are really talking about here is making clear to our client what's the context. Who are you coaching? Is your boss in the organization, or is it the client? So really clarifying confidentialities and contracting is the language they use to establish how long is this going to go on, how many sessions, really just laying it out so that everybody is clear on how it's going to proceed. Integrity is part of that, being accurate and honest in the representation of professional qualifications. And confidentiality is so important, both in coaching and mentoring. Confidentiality means that there's a clear agreement about when confidentiality will and will not be maintained. Obviously, we also have to respect the procedures and processes of organizations and also laws in countries. So for certain illegal activities or danger to self or others, you might not be able to maintain confidentiality, and it's important that the person you're working with knows that. And of course, inappropriate interactions refers to being culturally sensitive about boundaries and also avoiding romantic or sexual relationships with current clients or people that you might be mentoring. Conflicts of interest you want to avoid, and contracting also involves, how you're going to work with a client, terminating those professional relationships. The second big category is the professional conduct, and here it's really about maintaining the reputation of the profession, behaving in a way that helps people understand coaching can be very effective, recognizing equality and diversity. And coaching often involves challenging relationships and questions, but doing so in a supportive way. It also addresses, what happens if there's some breaches of professional conduct. Coaching is not a regulated field, although there are different certifications for coaching. and you can be kicked out of those organizations or those certifications removed for breaches. And again, there's some legal obligations, and you need to really stay up on those for organizations when you engage in these relationships. The third area about ethical responsibilities relates to excellent practice. And here we're talking about the qualifications, skills, and experiences that a coach would have to bring to that relationship, that you're healthy and mentally fit to be able to practice, and that you also engage in some ongoing supervision yourself. So if I'm the coach, that I'm working with someone or a group of other professionals just to have some check-in, to make sure that I'm engaging in reflective practice, and I have more experienced colleagues who can help me. And of course, coaches need to engage in continued professional development to hone their skills and develop and systematically evaluate how well they're doing. So we've covered a lot of ground. What's important is to think about coaching as a subset in that mentoring universe. And again, we're going to focus on goals. We have some frameworks. We're going to get more in depth with that, with processes, that you know the applications. When might you use coaching for skill development, performance, or developmental? Thinking again about those outcomes, and finally, really keeping your ethical responsibilities at the forefront when you engage in these relationships. Well, hopefully this gives you some basic fundamentals in addition to the readings that will help you start thinking, what are the assumptions you have about coaching if you were to become a coach, engage in informal or formal coaching in your organization, or have a coach. These are things you'd want to look for. It might be the case that sometimes you engage just informally in coaching activities as a supervisor, so you might not contract with an employee. When we're talking about the contracting, it's really coaching for pay, and this is often happens in organizations. Coaches increasingly are hiring internal coaches, and so that the issues of confidentiality are really important to resolve. So if I share something with an internal coach, who else is that going to be shared with? So being clear about those issues is really critical. So increasingly, people hire external coaches for pay, or organizations are hiring people to serve as internal coaches, and you might do so informally. Well, I hope this has been helpful, and until next time, I'm Dr. Lunsford.